It doesn't happen very often, but every now and then an RPG masterpiece is released, eschewing almost every popular convention of modern day games. Ni No Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch, instead delivers something wholly fresh and entertaining. In most RPGs, or in most games in general, the story revolves around some grand purpose. Save the world, save the princess, or plot lines of that ilk. However, our main protagonist's purpose is a bit more mundane, yet extremely important to him. The story of Ni No Kuni begins with Oliver and Mr. Drippy standing in an unknown clearing for seemingly no reason when suddenly they find themselves in the middle of an Ulk stampede. Why are they there? How did they get there? Both good questions, and fortunately, we aren't left hanging in suspense for too long. A quick, or not so quick rather, flashback takes us to Motorville, a generic city set in a generic country that any generic child might find himself being raised in. Oliver lives with his mother, Ollie, and finds himself doing typical young boy things like getting groceries for his mother and hanging out with friends. Now Philip, his best friend, apparently has completed something that the two have been excited about for a while and decide that later that evening would be the best time to try it out. Unfortunately, the innocence of this picture-perfect little community can't last forever. Other world beings have taken an interest in our little Oliver and decide to snuff out the life force of the pure-hearted one before he has the chance to stop their evil ways. So, while they plot their malicious plans, Oliver manages to sneak out of his house and head over to Philip's garage for the big unveiling. Once everything is set up, we learn that Oliver's genius mechanic friend has built a little car. Now, anxious to take it out for a spin, the two quickly crank it up and away it goes. It's around this time that Oliver's mother has a premonition that something bad is about to happen, and, searching first his room and then the rest of the house itself, Ollie discovers that her child is nowhere to be found, so out she goes to find her prodigal son. Now that Oliver has placed himself in a dangerous situation, the White Witch initiates her plan to kill off the troublesome child. When the wheels fall off, quite literally, Oliver finds himself in some serious trouble. As luck would have it, his mother happens along at the right place at the right time. She immediately dives into the canal to save her child from drowning, and a few tense moments later, we see that she succeeds, but at a terrible cost to herself. It seems that she had some heart problems of her own, and the high level of excitement and stress causes her to have a heart attack where she later dies. Heartbroken, we find Oliver still in his room mourning the loss of his mother. This is really a touching moment, as he is now all alone in the world, with no one to turn to for guidance and nurturing. All that is left to him now is a little doll that Ollie had crafted for her son to keep him company when she was at work. Stirred by the memory, Oliver begins crying, and upon the tears touching the doll, we see that this is actually not a normal doll at all, but instead is an imprisoned fairy known as Mr. Drippy.
What's all this? Curse lifted, is it? Tiny! I'm free! Free!
Mr. Drippy tells Oliver of his world and how it is under the influence of a dark djinn known as Shadar. Bad things happen to good people, and in general life is unpleasant under the cruel tyranny of this spiteful demon. The High Lord of the Fairies, that's Mr. Drippy, asks Oliver to come to his world to restore peace and order, but at first is rebuffed. Oliver is somewhat reluctant so soon after the passing of his mother, but, undaunted, Mr. Drippy tells him that there is possibly a way to save his mother in the fairies' world, and this seems to be the right motivation for our little hero to begin his quest. So off he sets to the world of Ni No Kuni to right the wrongs of Shadar and ultimately the White Witch, while building up his wizard abilities and finding allies to help him throughout his journey.
Hey, wait! Wait for me!
By now, you've probably noticed that the artwork is nothing short of amazing in this game. That's because it was done by Studio Ghibli, whose anime repertoire includes such titles as Kiki's Delivery Service, Princess Mononoke, and Spirited Away, to name just a few. Basically, this is the cream of the crop in Japanese animation, and their transition to an RPG medium by no means disappoints. Studio 5, the developers, didn't just stop right there. The soundtrack is performed to a captivating degree by the Tokyo Philharmonic Orchestra. Everything about this game screams top-notch quality, and the love and care given this title shows throughout. Of course, what is a game without solid gameplay mechanics? Does the rest hold up to the already excellent graphics and sound? Combat starts out pretty simple, as it's just Oliver versus cute little animals. All creatures are visible on the world map, so it's possible to avoid most encounters. Battles take place on an open field whereby you can move around, issue commands, and attempt to avoid incoming attacks. Occasionally, little drops of light will drop from enemies. These are called glims. Glims will, depending on their color, restore a small portion of your HP or MP. Now there is also a golden glim, which is a lot more rare, that will restore all your HP and MP as well as allow you an ultimate attack. But chances are you'll only ever see these in long drawn-out battles with boss-type characters. Early on in the game, you are granted access to familiars. Now familiars are a bit like Pokemon in the fact that you can send them out to battle for you. Different familiars are better suited for different situations, and you'll find yourself cycling through them as battles wage on. Keep in mind that each familiar can only stay out in battle for so long before their stamina starts to run low. Calling them back immediately begins to fill up their stamina meter, so this isn't much of a drawback, but rather forces you to be a little more strategic in their use. Another thing you'll probably notice is that they don't have health points or magic points of their own, but instead use their host's pool of HP and MP to power themselves. This actually makes sense, as familiars are supposedly a manifestation of the characters themselves, and it means less health point tracking on your end, so all in all it's a system that works. Eventually, you'll pick up some companions that'll help you on your journey. And I use the term help loosely. This is probably the only real weak link in the game. In theory, having assistance should mean battles are less of a chore, and in some cases this is how it worked out. However, the AI is not the brightest, and unless you tell them to use no MP, you'll find that they've burned through their entire allotment within a few battles. This can be heavily frustrating at times when you find that your careful management of precious resources has been completely undone by a magic-happy companion. Add to this the fact that you have no real control over which familiar the AI uses, and it feels like you're more of a babysitter than a partner. See, I decided to give Esther a more powerful familiar to help us both out. Did she ever switch out to use it? Nope. She seemed to have a lot more faith in her weaker bird-shaped beast than in my quicker and stronger loner. And you would think that putting a different familiar in the first slot would help out with this, but no. Seconds after the battle starts, I find that Esther would sometimes quickly revert back to her preferred MP guzzling familiar, and the cycle of frustration with my idiot companion began anew. I mean, why waste MP on an enemy who is almost already dead? Regardless, this is really the only problem I had with the game. Now, like Pokemon, you can metamorph your familiars into stronger versions. This requires different special items that depend on their particular sign. For instance, a Moondrop will only metamorph a familiar who is aligned with the moon sign. In order to acquire new familiars, Esther, after completing a story quest, has the ability to tame them on the field of battle. This seems to be pretty random, but once an enemy is sufficiently pummeled, you will occasionally see little hearts floating around their heads. This is the moment when the tame and serenade options become available, so if you intend to collect them all, be on the lookout for this visual cue, or else you'll be stuck with a limited number of familiars to work with. So all in all, Ni No Kuni manages to separate itself from the pack with eye-catching visuals, wonderfully orchestrated music, an engaging and original story, and adequate battle mechanics. There is so much to see and so much to do in this world, and nearly every moment of it will be time well spent. I can't recommend this game enough, especially to those who enjoy JRPGs and anime to begin with. Now, is this the game that will do what Final Fantasy VII did for the PlayStation? Only time will tell. But for now, those who are willing to embark on an adventure of a lifetime will surely come away with a greater appreciation for this remarkable game. Thanks for watching, fellow gamers, and I hope to see you again soon.
Fun.